One of Putin's chief rivals is dead, an unfortunate habit for anyone seeking to oppose the megalomaniac dictator. Alexei Navalny, whom many saw as a glimmer of hope for a reformed and democratic Russia, was declared dead on February 16, 2024. The question is, why did Putin kill him, and why did he wait so long to do it? Navalny was a popular figure amongst the Russian youth and many in the West, representing the hope that Russia could be turned from Putin's disastrous course and change the nation's zero-sum mentality versus the West. He began his political career in 2000, joining the Russian United Democratic Party Yabloko and becoming the head of the Moscow Party subdivision for the upcoming parliamentary election campaign. In 2005, he joined the Social Council for the Central Administrative Okrug of Moscow, the city's very core, and participated in the Moscow City Duma election that same year. Not a big fan of Yabloko, Navalny initiated a youth social movement named DA, or Democratic Alternative. He set up a series of public debates that became popular enough to be featured on the state TV, but after 2 episodes with very high ratings, the show was abruptly canceled. Navalny had started to ruffle the feathers of those in power, namely Vladimir Putin, and his popularity with the youth made him both a rising opposition star and a political threat. In 2007, Navalny left Yabloko. At the same time, the party expelled him. He co-founded the National Russian Liberation Movement, intent on restoring a working democracy to the country. However, because this is Russia, Navalny also allied himself with far-right nationalist groups, such as the Movement Against Illegal Immigration. The organization allegedly opposed illegal immigration, but in truth, it pushed far-right extremist views of racism, sexism, and homophobia. In one video, Navalny appeared dressed as a dentist, comparing immigrants to cavities that had to be removed. Navalny's racist views extended to Georgians when he backed Putin's invasion of Georgia in 2008, going so far as to call Georgians, quote, rodents. Navalny also did not criticize Russian imperialist policy, seeing no problem with the invasion or Putin's military actions in Chechnya. In Russia, Navalny was about as close as one was going to get to a liberal democratic leader, and while much of what he said and supported seemed to fall in line with Putin, Navalny's criticism of the Russian government corruption put him on Putin's bad side. The 2011 parliamentary elections were met with accusations of fraud, with 6,000 people gathering in Moscow to protest. Helping to fuel the protest, Navalny and other protesters were arrested, and he was imprisoned for the maximum sentence of 15 days under the charge of defying a government official. This move proved to be decisive in shaping Navalny's political future, as the clout gained by the arrest caused Navalny to become even more popular amongst Russians disenfranchised with the Putin regime. He immediately used his new popularity to call on the Russians to oppose Putin, and he soon became the only person in Russia that most people thought could run against Putin. Yet Navalny told reporters that running against Putin would be useless, as the elections would be rigged. Unlike federal defendant Donald Trump's allegations, Russian elections really are rigged, and have been since Putin took power. Navalny offered to run if there was international oversight of the coming presidential election, but only then. Instead, he took to protesting and gathering a crowd of 50,000 people just over a week after being released from prison. Putin would go on to win the 2012 election, to nobody's surprise, and Navalny staged an anti-Putin rally that drew as many as 20,000 people. This officially made Navalny a significant threat to Putin, and he was arrested and held for several hours, perhaps as a warning. The warning went unheeded though, and after Putin's inauguration on May 8th, Navalny and others were once more arrested for leading an anti-Putin rally with a sentence of 15 days. The arrest would prompt Amnesty International to name Navalny a prisoner of conscience, until Navalny's far-right racist views came to light, at which point they stripped him of that title. It was time for Putin to take action, and Navalny was hit with an embezzlement charge for allegedly stealing timber from a state-owned company back in 2009. Previously, an investigation against him had failed to turn up any evidence of corruption, and yet the next year Navalny was put on trial and sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement. After an appeal, the sentence would be suspended, and Navalny was put on probation. But his criminal indictment would serve to disqualify him from future elections. Putin had bought himself the leverage he needed to keep Navalny in check, even targeting a company headed by him under claims of defrauding the Union of Right Forces political party way back in 2007. Navalny's popularity continued to rise, however, and he took on corruption in Russia while delivering his political messages over YouTube, making him even more popular with the youth. In 2019, Moskovsky Shkolnik, a company owned by everyone's favorite quitter Yevgeny Prigozhin, filed a lawsuit against Navalny after he uncovered evidence that Prigozhin's company was procuring subpar food for Moscow schoolchildren, resulting in outbreaks of dysentery. The court sided with Prigozhin, and Navalny was forced to pay 29.2 million rubles. Navalny was becoming a serious headache to Putin and his cronies due to his political activism and his many investigations into Russian corruption. At last, Putin decided to act, and on August 20, 2020, Russian FSB agents poisoned one of Navalny's water bottles with a Novichok nerve agent. A later investigation would reveal that there had been previous attempts to poison him over 3 years of surveillance carried out against him by the FSB. The poison took hold while he was on a flight from Tomsk to Moscow, requiring the plane to make an emergency landing. Navalny went into a coma and was put on a ventilator, with medical staff confirming that he had been poisoned, until police began arriving to cordon off Navalny's room. At that point, the medical staff refused to speak to reporters. Navalny was released from the hospital and taken via plane to Berlin to receive further treatment. In 2021, Navalny returned to Russia despite knowing that he would immediately be imprisoned upon his return. He felt that he needed to lead the fight for Russia's future from within and did not wish to become an exiled opposition figure. Upon landing, he was arrested for violating the terms of his previous probation, which barred him from leaving Russia. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in a labor colony, prompting protests across Russia. Those protests would seal Navalny's fate. The real question for most in the West is, why did Putin allow Navalny to live after the 2020 poisoning? With the assassination attempt being a failure, something disturbingly common for Russia's FSB, Putin likely weighed his options carefully on how to deal with Navalny. The mass protests that ensued after his sentencing only proved how popular he was, and killing him immediately upon returning would have not just prompted even greater outrage, but completely discarded any notion of plausible deniability. If Agent Smirnov and Borscht hadn't botched their job and done it properly, Putin's headache would have been over. But keeping Navalny alive was a headache all on its own, especially as Putin's popularity began to slide in the wake of the February 24th Ukrainian invasion. For 2 decades, Putin has struck an informal deal with the Russian public. They will turn a blind eye to corruption, and he doesn't mess with their personal lives. That deal was broken with the mass exodus of Western companies from Russia, along with crippling sanctions, with casualties increasing and rounds of mobilization. For the first time, Putin faced an unknown future. The Russian presidential election of 2024 is a foregone conclusion. Putin will win it because Russian elections are rigged. However, Putin's hold on power is tenuous, and Prigozhin's half-hearted rebellion in the summer of 2023 signal not just the most significant challenge to Putin's authority, but the inherent weakness of the Russian state. Had Prigozhin not turned his own forces around, there was no military force in Russia capable of stopping his march before he reached the Kremlin. Putin desperately needs to consolidate power once more, and Navalny's execution in a Siberian prison camp serves both to rid him of a political opponent and to send a signal to the rest of the establishment. Killing him was a risky move, and by doing so, Putin has shown any other would-be challengers that he's willing to take extreme measures no matter how perilous the political climate. Navalny served as a pressure relief valve for many years, allowing opposition to Putin's government to vent their frustrations through the illusion of hope. Now, though, Putin needs to remind everyone who's on top, and while the national election is guaranteed to end in a resounding Putin victory, it's unknown how Navalny's supporters will take the election results. Putin may have turned Navalny into a martyr, and historically speaking, Russia already has one significant revolution under its belt at a time when its military is caught in a disastrous, failing war. Now, go watch how Putin went from KGB spy to president of Russia, or click this other video before you too fall out of a window.